Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. The weather has been a little bit crappy and I haven't been feeling real great, so I'm a little bit behind on starting our monthly meal prep. So if you are new here and haven't been here before, each month I do my monthly or 6 weekly-ish grocery haul, and then from that point I show you how I manage to use those groceries to last us the month, whether preserving, bulk cooking, freezer cooking, whatever I do, I share that along nearly daily for 10 days to a fortnight, depending on how long it takes me to get through it all. And I normally put a video out every day if I can. I haven't been well. I've had a really lazy couple of days trying to just feel a bit better, and the weather has been sucky. So this is the first one for this month. So I got home from my groceries on Friday, and it's Monday morning when I'm filming this, but this is yesterday's prep. So as I've discussed before, one of the first things that I have to prep when I get home from the monthly shop is beef mince. So beef mince doesn't last very long in the fridge because of the extensive surface area. It is quicker to go off than most other meats. So it is one of the first things that I try and get out of the way when I start with my grocery prep. So yesterday was beef mince, so we did hamburgers and sausage rolls and bolognese and a bunch of things. So I'm going to share how I split all the beef up and did all that for that. I did get my new phone, so I was going to try and figure out filming with the new phone so that I wouldn't have as many focus issues, but it was all just a bit too much. I was too frustrated with trying to just get things done and having had to have a couple of slow days, so I didn't get there. So I will continue to keep on trying to figure that out as I go, but for the moment you'll just have to deal with the fact that this camera does not focus very well a lot of the time and drops focus, and I don't notice because my hands are dirty or I'm not looking at the screen, or anyway, that's life, and oh well. So enjoy the video today, whole lot of beef prep, and I will see you again hopefully tomorrow, and have a great day. Thanks for watching. Alrighty, so mince today. So the first thing I did was I made some hamburger buns for dinner to have hamburgers. I normally buy the brioche buns from Aldi. I really like having them because they last quite a while, obviously because they're high in sugar, and I know they're not the greatest, but they are tasty. They're nice and small. We like small buns with our burgers. We'd prefer more meat and more salad and less bun, but they didn't have any, so I also couldn't get any of just the plain tip-top burger buns at Costco. They were sold out of those, and I didn't want the brioche buns from Costco because we just find them too large. There's just too much bun, and it's just they're lovely, but it's not real great for us. So I decided that I would have to cook some. Now, I didn't have my starter sorted. As I said, I haven't been feeling well, so I didn't have my starter sorted. So I just did a yeasted brioche bun, a very light brioche. We don't like real eggy brioches. We like a nice lightweight one. So I just mixed that up. It's got a little bit of ghee in it, couple of eggs, a little bit of sugar, but nothing extensive. So I did a batch that made 18 of those, I think it was, and made them first thing in the morning because the weather is a bit cool, so I knew that they would take quite a while to rise. Did them up, put them in the trays to proof while I got started on everything else, and they did take quite a while. I don't know what time it is that I put them in to proof, but when I started the proofing process, but I didn't cook them until like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's how long it took them to get to sort of a nice and puffy doubled sort of a size. So once that was done and put aside, I started on the rest of the prep. So first up, I needed to make some stock. I needed some stock to add to the bolognese, but also I'm intending to make a whole bunch of soups over the next few days, and I also needed dog food. So what I do is I make stock up with onion, garlic, carrots, whatever I happen to have. I didn't add any zucchini or sweet potato to this particular one because I wanted the stock to be fairly clear, because I was going to use it for canning. But if I'm using it purely for dog food, I add sweet potatoes, zucchinis, anything that I have excess of. And I use my pressure cooker, or it's a canner, but it can be used as a pressure cooker for this one. I use my aluminium one for this one because it's a low acid, so it's not going to cause any pitting in the aluminium. And I did 2 big bags of chicken bones, and these bones are from all the thighs that I was piecing last month that I kept in the freezer to make stock with. So I cook that, and it pressure cooks for about 90 minutes, and once it's done you can just crumble the bones in your fingers. So we puree all the solids up into a feed for the dogs, a wet sort of a feed. We pulled big chunks of onion out, but someone did comment about onion being poisonous for dogs and garlic being poisonous for dogs, and yes, that is correct. However, onion requires about 150 grams per kilo of body weight to become toxic, and garlic is 35 grams or 50 grams or something per kilo of body weight, so it's quite a significant amount required. And this food that we give them, they only get a cup of with their dry food every night, so it's not really that big a deal. On to the bolognese. So my bolognese base, I use veggies, onion, so carrot, onion, celery, garlic, all that sort of thing, and I mince it up in the Thermomix as well. So you can just dice it nice and fine and cook it off, but I find it easier just with the kids to mince it up. It just means that there's no chunks of vegetables in there for them to whinge about, and it just makes life easier in general. So I just cut them all into chunks and use the Thermomix, mince it all up and stick it all in the pan to be cooked off. Whatever veggies we have work. I used some dried mushrooms here as well. If I have fresh mushrooms, I'll use fresh ones, but they weren't well priced this month, so I have jarred ones for use in case of that. So I just powdered them in the Thermomix as well, so that they were a powder, and threw that in with the veggies as well. I also add bacon to my bolognese. So this bacon was a bit of a score. It's a 2 kilo bag of just diced bacon pieces for $7 it was. Obviously it's not the highest quality bacon, but that doesn't matter because we're not eating it as slabs of bacon, we're eating it as part of cooking. So this will be good for a variety of things. So I didn't weigh it, but I added a bunch to my bolognese, as well as a bag of frozen zucchini from the summer. So the only thing you have to remember when you're adding all this amount of vegetables to something like a bolognese is that there's a lot of water content. So it depends on how you like your bolognese as to whether this is going to impact it. If you like really thick bolognese, then you have to compensate for that, adding more tomato paste, cooking it down for longer, or whatever else. But you just have to remember that adding all these veggies will increase the water content of your bolognese. We really like the flavor of it though, so I like carrot adds a real lot of sweetness to your bolognese without adding any extra sugar or anything like that. So we enjoy that, but it is something to be aware of. So I cook all that off first in the pan in a bit of oil, try and lose some of the water content, but also cook off the onion. There was some garlic in there too, I don't think I mentioned that. And cook it all off till the onion's translucent and some of the water has been cooked off. Then I grabbed my other canning pot out. So I don't have very many big stock pots that have a decent base on them. I have quite a few large pots, like 10-litre pots maybe or whatever, but they're not quite big enough to do some of the big batches that I do. I end up having to use 2 of them, and our stovetop isn't working at the moment, so I've only got the Camp Chef that's working particularly well at the moment, so I've only got those 2 spots to cook on right now. So I grabbed my other canning pot. Now this one's stainless steel, which is why I'm using this one for the bolognese, because the bolognese is an acid-based dish. So I used the stainless steel one for this, and I just cooked off all the mince in the bottom. So I'm using a full tray of mince here, around about the 4 kilo mark. And I cooked that off and broke that up a little bit before adding in all the vegetables that I'd already cooked off, and then let that break down and cook off a little bit as well. While that was going, I started on the next task, which was sausage rolls. So I started the vegetables for the sausage rolls. These are, again, a similar range of vegetables as most things are. I used celery and onion and carrot. No, I don't think I used carrot in this one. Celery, onion, and garlic, I think, for this one. And I diced it all up, minced it all up in the Thermomix as well, so that it would be nice and fine. And then I cooked it off as well so that it lost some of its moisture too. To the Bolognese pot, I added some diced tomatoes. So I got these great big 2.5 kilo tins of diced tomatoes, knowing that I was going to do a big batch of Bolognese. I have plenty of roasted tomatoes on the shelf, but I prefer them for things where the tomatoes more the main part of the dish. Like I use it for my pizza sauces and I use it for that sort of thing, whereas in Bolognese it's much cheaper and easier to use the diced tomatoes until such time as I can grow enough to have all this on my own anyway. So I used 2 of the big tins of diced tomatoes, so 5 kilos of the diced tomatoes, into the Bolognese pot. Kavik wanted to help try and open the tins, but he was a little bit didn't quite have the leverage to do it. I also added 2 little containers of tomato paste and 2 jars of the passata as well into the Bolognese. I was trying to fiddle with my phone at the time, trying to take camera angles from an opposite side while I was doing this, and it didn't work, so you don't see me putting it in the pot, but this is what I added. 2 of those tomato pastes, 2 of the passatas into the pot as well. I also added 2 bags of pearl barley. We use pearl barley in all our Bolognese. It makes it go further, so it sucks up some of the liquid and it extends the mince and all that sort of thing. So I added 2 bags of pearl barley. It means that the Bolognese will need to simmer for a fair bit longer than, like, I probably could have just taken it off within half an hour, but you add the barley and it's going to take longer, and we don't mind because I simmer it anyway. I needed some breadcrumbs for the sausage rolls, so I had some sourdough bagels that were in the freezer still, so I grabbed them out and just stuck them in the Thermomix to make them into crumbs. You want a lightweight crumb for sausage rolls, because if they're too heavy it's going to make the sausage rolls too heavy. So I find that these bagel crumbs work well when I do them really fine, but if you're going to purchase breadcrumbs for this sort of thing, I would go for something like a panko crumb, but unless you can get them really, really fine, store-bought breadcrumbs they're a bit too heavy for this sort of thing. But if you can grind your own up, then all to the better. Otherwise, something like a panko crumb would work best. I added 2 kilos of raw mince to the cooked veg and breadcrumb mix. So the breadcrumbs were added to the veg that had been cooked off, and then the 2 kilos of mince was added as well. I also added 2 eggs to this mix, and then I mixed it up. Now, it's easiest just to mix it by hand. You just want to sort of squeeze it through your fingers. You don't want to work it too hard because it'll end up tough, but you want it to be, the veggies and stuff to be spread evenly through the mince, because you don't want big chunks of mince in your big chunks of meat without any other flavour in your sausage rolls, if you can avoid it. So mixing it by hand is definitely easier than trying to mix it up with a spoon. You could probably use a paddle in a KitchenAid. You'd have to be careful not to overmix it and emulsify it, and I only have one KitchenAid bowl at the moment, so I have to be aware of that, and sometimes can't use it for other things because I have already used it that day and my sink is full and I just couldn't be bothered. So doing it by hand works well. I shape it out on puff pastry. So I cheated this time and used puff pastry. It's so easy. Puff pastry is just such a painful thing to make. You can make sausage rolls on like a short crust or a sourdough pastry, but they do end up quite heavy, and it's just a lot of work for the quantity that I make. So puff pastry it was today. Again, this section of video is out of focus. I apologize for that. So I split the pieces of puff pastry down the middle so that they're 2 lengths, and then it's about a heaped third of a cup, maybe half a cup of mix that goes in each one, and I just shape it into a rectangle down the middle of the puff pastry, and then fold the puff pastry around it so that it's sealed. Sometimes I have to remove a bit of extra meat if I've got too much there, because you want the pastry to meet, otherwise it's going to bust open in the oven, and it still tastes fine, but it makes a mess on your trays, and it's not as easy to pick up and eat. And the whole idea of sausage rolls is sort of that they're like a pick up and eat kind of a food, especially for the kids. So I pre-slice them before they go in the oven, not completely through, but just through the top. And then I mixed an egg with a little bit of water so that I could wash the tops of them so that they would brown up nicely. If I had sesame seeds, I would normally sprinkle them with sesame seeds. I really like sesame seeds. There is a couple of people who don't, but they're pretty easy to brush off if they don't want them. But I didn't have any anyway, so they got it without. And then they go in the oven. Now, they vary in time depending on how thick you've made the meat and what your oven's running at. I ran them at about 200, and I reckon that the trays took around about 35 minutes to cook. But it's very subjective to your location and the ingredients in your sausage rolls as to how long that's going to take. The next thing I did was I added some of the stock to the bolognese. So the stock was finished, it had done its 90 minutes, it had come off pressure, I'd removed the weight, and I could open the lid. And all I did was I got some of the nice, rich, fatty liquid off the top of the stock and poured it into the bolognese to compensate for all that pearl barley. So prior to that, it had gone really thick, it was really chunky, tasty, super tasty, but if you freeze it like that, then when you defrost it, it's going to end up too thick and you're going to have to add liquid. So I'm much better off adding liquid before I freeze it. So I added, I reckon, about probably 2 litres of stock to the bolognese, mixed it up, let it simmer for a little while. Now, I don't think I showed the bolognese again, so that ended up, once it was cooked and cooled, we put it in the gallon-size Ziploc bags for the freezer, and this batch made 12 packs of around about 1.2-ish kilos of bolognese, which is enough for the kids to have a meal and potentially a bit of leftovers for the next day. Next thing I had to do was divide the dough. So once the brioche dough had around about doubled, then I needed to divide it and shape it to put it in the trays. So I weigh everything. If you're new here, you may not have seen it, but everything I do, I weigh. I find it easier. It allows me to know exactly how much I need of everything, and it lets me know exactly what the portion sizes are for everyone. So for the buns, I made them about 90 grams, which gave me 18 of them, I think. And I weighed them out to 90 grams each piece, and then I shaped them into balls. So you just want to bring all the edges into the middle and then roll them till you get a nice tight skin over the top and place them in the tray to do their second rise. It's a pretty easy dough to handle, this one, this yeasted brioche dough. It's decent hydration, but it's not real sticky because of the butter and stuff in it, so it's pretty easy to handle. So I did all that and placed them in the baking trays and put them aside to rise for the rest of the day. The kids decided that they had to have sausage rolls for lunch, even though there was plenty of other food. So I pulled the sausage rolls out of the oven and I cut up a whole bunch of them and put them on a tray for the kids. They had these with the barbecue plum sauce, which they really enjoyed. And I will definitely need to buy more plums next year. I stopped buying them while they were in season because we had so much on the shelf, but we definitely don't have enough barbecue plum sauce to get through for the rest of the year. So next year I will take that under advisement and have to make a lot more. We put all the leftover stock into just some ghee jars to go into the fridge. I will use that in the next couple of days for various things. The rest is pureed up for dog food, as I had said before. The buns had done their second proof and they went into the oven as well. Then I had to make the burger patties. So I just use some Himalayan salt and onion powder in my mince. I don't add anything else. I find that is plenty enough. The mince that you buy from Costco is fatty enough to hold together without too much issue, so that's all we do. And I weigh my hamburger patties just like everything else. I'd make them around about the 90-gram mark, and I will just weigh them all out into the balls, and I shape them just by hand. I have tried burger presses and stuff before. I used to have one of the Tupperware ones, and it's great, but it just gives me more washing up, and honestly we're just not that fussy, so it really doesn't make that much of a difference. So I just flatten them out with the heel of my hand. One day it might be nice to get a burger press for cooking them, because it'll stop them doing that puffing in the middle that they do when you're cooking them, but really it's all just aesthetics and I suppose ease of eating. When they're a bit thinner, it's a little easier to eat them on the buns, but generally speaking I just shape them all by hand, and I fry them off in the cast iron pan to give them that nice crunchy crust on them, so a nice hot pan, and everyone loves them just like that, so I'm not going to change too much with that. The buns came out of the oven. This is what they look like when they were cooked. I totally forgot to do an egg wash on them, so they're not particularly brown on top, but they were perfectly cooked even if they look a little blonde here. I generally make up a platter for the kids for their burgers so they can serve themselves. So we just cut up some tomatoes. These are just tomatoes from the garden, so they're mostly cherry tomatoes because that's all that's ripening for the moment, and some mixed lettuce leaves and some patties, and then cut up some buns for them. They are allowed 2 burgers if that's what they want, but we always serve them up just one to start with, and then they can come back for more later if they'd like. We had no mayo, and I very much like mayo on my burgers, so I had to make some up, and this is my standard duck egg mayo. It's 3 egg yolks put in the jar with some lemon juice. I've used some cowboy candy here, and a couple of spoonfuls of homemade mustard. Mustard helps with the thickening up of the mayo. Even if you use mustard powder, it helps with that thickening, so I highly suggest using that, and we love the flavour of it anyway. Then I use my immersion blender, and all you want to do is get the immersion blender right onto the bottom of the jar, covering the egg yolks. I've got a whole video on how to make mayo on the channel, but you just want the immersion blender to cover those egg yolks. Then it's going to mix the egg yolks first, it's going to emulsify the egg yolks, and then as they get emulsified, it's going to slowly add some drizzles of olive oil down the side into the egg yolks, much the same premise as if you were drizzling olive oil into a food processor while it was running. So it slowly does that and makes it up, and then you have mayo. On my burgers I like to put a decent amount of mayo. I like mayo on everything, and we use the caramelized onion jam. So I get asked a lot about how we use our caramelized onion jam. This is one of the ways, but pretty much on anything. It is basically caramelized onion a little bit sweeter, so it saves me time and effort in caramelizing onion by just being able to use it straight out of the jar and make it in bulk, and we love it in all sorts of things, but especially on burgers. Tomatoes from the garden, lettuce mix, and then the burger patties as the same as the kids. So that was 8 kilos of mince done today, and all that I managed to do. So I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope you got some tips, tricks, or some inspiration from any of it, and I will see you again tomorrow. I'm not sure what I'm working on tomorrow, but I will share it and we shall see. Thanks for watching.